Does the thought of educating your children at home or your child at home just cause so many questions that you're finding it hard just to even get started? Or maybe you're thinking about how you're supposed to control their environment. You're thinking about the curriculum and the time, setting out their schedules, uh, signing them up for activities and how you fit that all in. It can seem so overwhelming. But at the same time, do you want to create a spark for your child's learning to ignite, where they just are excited about learning? I'm really excited about this conversation. We're going to be talking today, and I have a guest joining me. We're going to be talking about simple mindset shifts needed to create the spark for learning at home. I'm Diana Rolston. I want to welcome you to Spark Homeschool Parent. Each week, I talk about those questions and those fears and the doubts that we as parents have when we're educating our children at home. I would like to say that all of that goes away once you get started, but for those of you that have been educating your children at home for quite a few years now, you know that's not the case. So I want to welcome you where you can hear encouragement and support. I also want to welcome those families. I know there's a lot of you who have just started homeschooling just for a few years. You absolutely are welcome, and you're going to enjoy this conversation. And then there are a pile of you who are just thinking about homeschooling, who haven't brought their children home from the traditional environments of education yet, and you have lots of questions. And it is awesome that you are watching this podcast, educating yourself, getting ready to start strong. So welcome to you too. And I want to encourage you, as you're watching, I have my guest live with me. If you have questions, send them in the comments and we can tackle those questions. But also if you're watching the replay, and I know most of you do watch these videos on replay, send in your questions too, your comments. I love to hear what everybody is thinking about the conversations that we're having. And I also have got lots of messages from you through Messenger or whatever other way. I welcome your comments. This conversation today is for you if you are looking to make that first step in educating your child at home. You're educating yourself, wondering how to do it. You're going to enjoy today's conversation. You're in the right place if you are looking for those mindset shifts that are needed to create the space that allows your child's learning to ignite. And welcome to you, and you're going to enjoy the conversation. If you're looking at creating a shift in your expectations, in your assumptions surrounding educating at home, because the way that you're thinking about it now just seems too overwhelming, you're going to enjoy the conversation I have today with my guest. She is an independent education consultant and speaker. She's working both with individuals and with families here in the Ottawa area, but also around the world, identifying and navigating education pathways that allow the whole family to thrive. She's a retired homeschooling parent, a former teacher, and education researcher. She has the heart-based, well-being focused approach to working with her clients. My guest lives with her spouse and her son and daughter. She says mostly grown up, and anyone with teenagers or young adults know exactly what she means when she says that. And like I said, she's living in the Ottawa area in Gatineau Hills in Quebec, Canada. Welcome to my guest. Let me bring her in here. Stephanie Sewell, it's nice to see you.
Hi, Diana. It's so nice to be here. Thank you for the lovely introduction.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I have been so looking forward to this conversation because I've listened to you a few times now, and we really connect with a lot of what we're saying. And you have a way of eloquently presenting your thoughts. So this is really exciting to have you here. Thank you.
Well, it's great to be able to speak to the people that you're speaking to on a regular basis.
You work with families that are looking at all sorts of options for educating their children. For the purposes of our conversation today, we're going to focus on the homeschooling option, which you homeschooled, I homeschooled. We know that before you get started, there's a lot of confusion, a lot of fears, a lot of doubts before families choose to homeschooling. I'm really curious, what's the most asked question you hear when parents approach you?
It's funny because that initial approach is often not even questions yet. It's the like, it's the speech. Out of that starts to emerge those questions. And, the questions have to do with things like, well, I'm not a teacher. How am I going to homeschool my kid? I can't even get my child to do their homework. How am I going to homeschool them? I'm not sure that I can spend that much time with my child. I love them, but I'm not sure I can be with them day in, day out. I really need time to work, or I need time for me to be well, to thrive myself. How am I going to have my kids around all the time? There's a lot of those kinds of practical questions, and also the questions that emerge from this little bit of panic about what does this shift, this crazy idea of not sending your kids to school, what will that actually look like?
And all very legitimate questions for sure, because most of us, I would say all of us, but I know as some home educated children are growing up and having their own children, it's becoming a little bit more popular, but most of us only know the traditional school setting, just like we sitting in the classroom in the local school. But then as families start to explore a little bit more about educating their children at home, they may hear things like unschooling, classical homeschooling, eclectic homeschooling, homeschooling with unit studies, Montessori. I can go on, Charlotte Mason, Waldorf. It can be really overwhelming.
Yeah.
And add to that confusion that a lot of families have. As our environments morphed over the years, I said that we had a relaxed though purposeful home education environment. But you're proposing a new term. Tell us about well-being based education.
Yeah, I have no idea if it's an original term. It's a term that has just been appearing in my brain lately, and it seems to, it's a very handy term because it helps to bring all of that confusion, all those questions, all of those, should I do this, or this, and help. It brings all of that down to, okay, let's just take a moment and breathe. Find that space of calm, figure out what allows your family to be well. If you're deciding to homeschool and your kids have been in school, you're probably coming out of some level of challenge around what education looked like. Maybe there was anxiety happening, maybe there was trauma, maybe there was school avoidance or flat out school refusal. So to me, the first thing to do is to take all of those ideas of how should this look and set them aside. And what we want to do is go, okay, where are we at right now? What's happening with our child? So I help parents to kind of go through a process of capture the moment. So whatever works best for them, maybe they're going to have a conversation, or ideally write it down. What's going on with your child right now? Write down all the things that aren't working, all the ways you're seeing your child stressed, anxious, not thriving, the behaviors, the impact that's having on the family, and those are all like pretty serious things, but the little things as well. They're like, when they were 4 years old, they were so happy and excited about learning and going to school. And now I'm watching that flame die out. Get all of it down on a piece of paper. And then start thinking, okay, well, this is our motivator. We don't want things to look like that anymore. What do we want them to look like?
And sorry, you could probably, when you do write them down and review them, you probably will see common threads through there, which is
Yes.
be really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And because also, writing those down for your child and for the family and for yourself, considering all those different pieces, you definitely will see those common threads because, if a child isn't thriving or a child is stressed, absolutely the family is going to be feeling that as a unit, which means the parents are feeling that as individuals. So it's really to kind of recognize all that and then say, okay, but what do we want? And again, I'll take families through a process of saying, what do you want for your child? Like when you first held them in your arms, what was your heart and your mind full of? This beautiful being, what did you want? And nobody has ever said, I wanted to make sure they knew all the capitals of Canada. It's all about, I want them to be happy and healthy. I want them to be well connected to family, to friends, to society, to community, all of those kinds of things. So when we're making a drastic change, like leaving school or not sending to school, it's really good to get really clear again. What do you want for your child? And when you're in that place, you start making decisions with well-being in mind, which is that idea of well-being based education. Because part of the process then, of course, is, okay, we're figuring out well-being. We're seeing that it's important for our kid to spend time with their grandparents. They need time alone. They need time with friends. They need more time outdoors than they were getting. They need to be eating better. They need to be sleeping more. Like, you're seeing all of that. You're starting to create a picture of how might their well-being come back. And then you start looking at education. Okay, if my child is an introvert and we saw that 5 days a week was burning them out, but we really like the idea of them being in some kind of group setting a few days a week, great. Now you have something that you're looking for. Go find it. If it doesn't exist, maybe you're going to create it. So those are the ways that being really clear on what well-being looks like and valuing it, because every single parent, once we get down to it, when we ask that question, we do value our kids' well-being first and foremost. And then seeing how education decisions come out of that. And the neat thing is your child might wind up right back in a classroom. But they'll be in that classroom with a completely different set of reasons for being there. Their motivations, how you handle situations that come up will be completely differently because you've gone through this process of figuring out and trusting well-being to be a driving force.
And like you say, the most important thing is not that they know their math tables or can write a good essay, but it's the strong mind and body and relationships and all those other things.
And all of being able to write, so I'll just say, being able to write a good essay is, for a lot of people, it's a really important skill. But we don't have to start with that as our driving force. We can start with well-being and know that, for those of us who need to learn how to write good essays, when we're whole and solid and confident in ourselves, we'll just go and figure out how to write that essay. We might sign up for a course, we might go to school, we might ask someone to help us. Lots of ways to learn to write an essay. There aren't lots of ways to be well.
That even just that, if someone just went away with just the last 5 minutes, it would be so beneficial to so many families. I love also how you're thinking of, often in homeschooling, we talk about child-centered education, but you are almost proposing a family-centered, with the child, a very important part of that family, but we all know that one upset, anxious, tired, whatever it is, child disrupts the whole family. Yeah, so I love that you're looking at.
When we're trying to be with our kids and we're feeling like we're not enough, or we're not teaching them properly, or we didn't do enough hours of school last week, like all of that gets in the way of that well-being. Because of course they're sensing what we're feeling, but importantly, we're not feeling good. And it's that sense that, when everybody's well-being is given importance, we can make decisions that will reflect it. But if we're just trying to make decisions about what we think school should be or education should be based on our own experiences and conventional mindsets, then we get kind of stuck in this like, oh, it should be this, it should be that. There's all these shoulds, and they're not really connected to us. And there's so many different shoulds, and there's so many different ways of doing things. So I figure if you get really clear on yourself and your family and what works for you, then you make better decisions. And I've seen it time and time again in my own family, but in the families that I work with.
Yeah. And listeners of the Facebook Lives and followers on Spark Homeschool Parent will have heard this many, many times, that one of the most important and first things that you do is to create that purpose, that why am I homeschooling? And that's what you're mentioning now also. You also started talking about that mind shift and the shifts that are necessary in our thinking to educate our children at home with joy, which is what we're all striving for. Joy for our children, joy for us, where they have that spark for learning. Talk to us a little bit about how you, some of those shifts that need to happen to overcome those massive stressors that many parents have.
Yeah, I think the stressors that you're referring to often come, because of our understanding of what education looks like and what the need is for people to be educated. So things like, you have to go to university to get a well-paying job. Things like you have to have a high school diploma to be able to go to university. Things like you have to learn to read and write by the time you're 7 or 8, or else you're behind. All of these kinds of thoughts they comprise our assumptions around education. And from our assumptions, that's usually what drives our decisions about how we educate our kids. So it's really worthwhile as a homeschooling family to invite yourself to challenge all of your assumptions. And sometimes it's that you don't even know to challenge it, right? Like, I never used to know that you could go to university without a high school diploma. I didn't know to ask that question. So as a homeschool parent, recognize that there's a whole bunch of things you're going to realize over this period of time. Some of them will be assumptions, some of them will be, myths, some of them, whatever it is. So keep your eyes and ears open. If you hear somebody say, you don't need a high school diploma, perk your ears up and say, what? I'm going to find out about that. Google, and you'll start to get some information. So that's one thing, is be open to things not being as you thought they were.
That's actually interesting and important to be surrounded in a community that helps you question those things, because we don't know what our assumptions or what the assumptions are that we're holding until we hear something different.
Absolutely. And that's, when I work with a family, like often parents will approach me looking to figure out how to homeschool their child. And it's a surprising detour to realize that it's actually a lot of the way to invest your time in those early months is re-examining or examining for the first time what you actually think and believe about education, so that you can start recognizing what your child needs and is asking for clearly or just by their behavior. So you can start to recognize that and trust that it's okay to act on that. And of course, you mentioned all the different things that we talk about, like Montessori, Waldorf, unschooling, and all that, but there's a word that comes up, which is deschooling. It's not a way of homeschooling. It's the idea that it takes time to emerge from the conventional education mindset and have the clarity, the openness, the spidey senses that allow you to start steering a new path. And so that deschooling time is really, really crucial. And sometimes that means, often it means, don't even think about curriculum for months, maybe even longer. Just focus on that well-being. Notice, is your child an early riser? Are they a late riser? Value that. That's a mindset shift. things like there's actually a really good Facebook group called something like, "What is my unschooler learning when?" And it's that idea that, your child goes through a day doing their thing, and you might look at them and think, "Oh, I'm going to pull my hair out. They're not doing anything useful or productive." But actually, mindset shift, they're learning all the time. And I'll often say to parents who are in this process, like, I challenge you to find a day that your child hasn't learned anything. And it looks different than what we're used to learning being school-based, but it's all valuable. And so it's that deschooling time is, it's realizing that when you're baking, those are math things you're thinking about. In my case, my son homeschooled for most of his childhood. He's a mountain biker and he loves to build trails. He now works as a trail builder and he works in a shop repairing mountain bikes. And if I look back at who he was when he was 5 or 6 or 7, he spent so much time playing with Lego and trains and like figuring stuff out. And all of that is present in his work now. And he's at university studying computer science. The way he thinks of coding and physics, and it's all there. I can see the seeds of that from when he was 4, 5, 6 years old. So that notion of watch what your child does when they're engaged and they're passionate, and recognize that you're seeing learning happening and you're seeing some seeds of their future. And so just starting to trust that and experiment with that and be curious about that and go and, talk to people who've got older homeschoolers or, young adults who've homeschooled and ask them, what was your kid like at that age? What are they doing now? That's a huge thing, I guess, again, for the mindset shift. We're used to knowing that success looks like you do well in school, you go to university, you do well in university, you get a job, it pays well, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
When we can start to explore success through different lenses, that can be really helpful. Look for people who didn't do a conventional education path, and you can start shifting your sense of success, which is really helpful when you're traveling an unusual pathway with your kids.
Yeah. Interesting. It sounds like your son is very similar. I have 3 boys who are young adults now and they also spent a lot of time playing with Lego and building and experimenting. But I also often say, for some parents think, oh, why are you doing Lego? You're 10, 12, whatever age, but they're not going to do Lego forever. It's like that's whatever they're experiencing and enjoying from building in Lego is helping them go to the next step with whatever that is. For your son, it was putting together bicycles, which is something that one of my boys did also. For another, it's doing the electronics components of the Lego robotics. It just all builds on each other. So never dismiss what we as parents may think as a trivial excitement that they have. It is all learning, and their learning just continues to grow.
Yeah, and it's almost like ripples in a pond, right? It's like, the stone drops, and maybe that's the Lego. Or in Oliver's case, he was also really into trains, trains. And then he had a period of time where it was birds. He knew everything about birds, and that was like the next circle out. And then it came into more to bikes. All that Lego playing and train building is still in there. It's what caused the rest of it to happen in the way that it did. Yeah. So in a way, all of his bird stuff, he didn't have to then start again to learn about bikes, because everything about birds and categorizing them and understanding, it was transferable to bikes. Obviously he wasn't thinking like this, but I'm looking back on it now going, yeah, we can recognize that as they really get into something, they're using all those muscles of, how do I learn about something I'm interested in? How do I organize that information in my brain? How do I seek knowledge from others if I want to do that? Mm-hmm. Here's an interesting one. How do I maintain my ownership of this interest when there might be parents around me going, oh, you're interested in birds? Let's sign you up for bird camp and buy you a bird book. And because that's what we do, right? We want to facilitate these interests, and sometimes we go too far.
Yeah.
And then the kid starts to feel like, oh, hang on, maybe I'm not interested in birds. So all of that is flexing those muscles that are so important for when they're young adults and choosing things like university or some kind of work that they're creating for themselves or travel. Like if you're going to go backpack around Europe, you really want to know how to make decisions.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all there. It's all connected.
Yeah. Another mindset that we had the opportunity to talk about previously is the thought from the parent, and absolutely it can feel overwhelming, that we need to control the curriculum, need to control the time and our child's schedule, the activities that they sign up for, that in our mind we are thinking that we need to act like a school and know how this whole 12 years or however long where our children are educating at home, we need to know how it's all going to roll out.
Yep.
But there's a lot of control that we need. But you suggest that that too needs a shift in our thinking.
It does. So it's completely understandable. And I also was thinking that way in terms of control when I started. When we send our kids to school, like it's pretty simple, right? Sign them up and then you know what it's going to look like. So if we pull them out, we assume that we need to know what it's going to look like. And that's fair to feel that way. The idea of kind of setting it all aside, this deschooling process, can be a pretty frightening process because it's like you're throwing everything out. But one thing to keep in mind is that through that process, you're still living life and you're still living as a family. And when people live together, and when anybody is living their life, we need rhythm and routine and schedule. Mm-hmm. Just because you're not following a particular curriculum for a period of time doesn't mean your life won't have rhythm to it. It might mean that you're not doing math at 1 p.m. and this at 9, but you're probably going to, in your family, if it makes sense to eat together, well, you're probably going to eat around the same time every day. You might always, read a book together after dinner. That kind of rhythm, and then the routine of things like, maybe my kids always used to go and spend time with my parents every week. So, Wednesday was grandparent day, and that wasn't at all schooly or academic, but it was a point in the week that we led up to that point, and we enjoyed the after effects of that time that they had with them. So if you're thinking, the idea of set curriculum aside for now, don't set everything aside that makes your family run smoothly. Your family has an identity, and that's tied up in certain things that you do. Screen time is a question that a lot of people ask about. Mm-hmm. It's perfectly fine to say to your kids, like, there's no curriculum right now, but screen time only happens at these times of day. That's fine if that works for your family. So the family unit really matters there. Mm-hmm. And I also just want to make sure that we touch on the idea that a lot of people will use curriculum in a very centered, helpful, positive, joyful way. And this idea of taking time to kind of come back to your well-being and focus on that doesn't preclude ever using curriculum. Mm. What it does is it allows you to get clear on what you might want out of curriculum. So you might come out of that time going, yeah, like we want something that's going to give us something to do 3 mornings a week. Or you might say, like, I can see they're learning what they need to learn all the time. It's just, math is a concern, and you have a conversation and your child says, yeah, like, I'd like to be at the same level as my friends for math. So then you figure out a way to do it. For us, when Oliver was young, it was French. We live in Quebec. He wanted, it made sense to him to learn some French. And so he agreed, we decided, there was consent from him to work through a French book. And so he did that as part of his time. So it's that idea of being clear with what is your starting point, but recognizing that that can take you anywhere, including really structured curricula, including school. I mean, Oliver chose to go to school for grade 12. But it comes from this place of what works for me.
Mm-hmm.
That's the important thing. And as parents, like it can be really fun to look at all those different curricula and just like explore it all. And by the way, the Canadian homeschooler, Lisa Marie Fletcher, she's just started a website which has reviews of curriculum. Excellent. And people can contribute to it. So that's an excellent resource. So go and enjoy it and like geek out on all that curriculum, but then realize that you want to start from awareness of where you are organically arrived at as a family and what your child is consenting to before you actually start buying stuff.
So yeah, that's a important thing, getting consent and excitement about learning from our children. When I know that very much was part of our conversations as my children were 12, 13, and through high school. I guess I'm questioning younger children and how much they know about what they want to be learning about.
It's a really good point.
When do we start asking them?
Well, I think we ask in different ways at different ages. You know, you're not going to ask your 2-year-old if they want to, I don't know, come for a walk with you. But you're probably going to notice where they're at. Like if they're in the middle of a tantrum, you're probably not going to like try to put their snowsuit on and take them for a walk. So on some level, you're noticing where they're at, and you're, in essence, you're seeking their consent by waiting or doing it in a way that's going to work for them. So if you look at things like, you know, learning to read or write or learning geography, what does consent look like when you're 8 or 9 years old? Well, maybe it looks like, you know, some of your homeschooling friends, you know, the moms were together and we thought about doing a geography club, and like, sorry, speaking from personal experience, this is where this example comes from. You know, we had the idea of like we get together once a week and we'd make food from a different country every time, and you know, the kids could work on a project about a country that they were interested in, and that was a fun thing. So we kind of said, yeah, like let's do that. But had I said like, I think we should sit down and learn about geography and get a tech, like, it probably wouldn't have flown.
Yeah.
So it's that sense of, you're not, what are you asking for consent to? You know, in that case, it was probably more, oh, I'm going to get to see my friends every week and we're going to eat and play and learn stuff as well. Like, yeah, I'm on board for that. So it's how you ask, you know, what is your child driven by at that stage in their life? And how do you therefore find out if they're consenting? Maybe that's the way of phrasing it that would be better, actually, rather than saying like, seek their consent. It's like, find out if they consent.
Yeah. Again, I was thinking about putting the bicycle parts together, and there's a lot of math calculations that need to be done from bicycles. One of my boys went to, or sort of that next ripple for him was small engines. And there's a lot that he needed to learn to do a better job at what he wanted to get done. So that also is, he would absolutely consent to, yes, I need to know ratios or whatever it is.
And you know, there's a really important phrase that parents of teens or older kids can remember, which is, let me know if I can help you with that.
Nice.
And so, you know, if you observe that your child is in a situation or they're saying like, oh, I need to learn this stuff, I can't figure out how to do this, you know, it's okay to say like, oh yeah, I can see there's some real mathematical like content in there. Let me know if I can support you to figure out how to learn it.
Yeah.
And if, you know, your child might simply say, no, I've got it. And then they might come back to you a week later and say, actually, could you help? Or they might say, I have no idea. And then you can go look at curriculum. Or maybe you're going to start thinking, oh, who do we know?
Yeah.
Is there a neighbor somewhere who's really into this kind of stuff, who could do a few sessions? Those are great opportunities. That's the joy of homeschooling, is that it doesn't have to be, where's the curriculum that will teach this? Maybe it's where's the person that will teach this.
And when we find other people in the community it helps us and it helps our children also realize that what they are learning does have use out in the world, and other people have studied whatever it is for many years or work at whatever it is. I am sure there are so many people who want to continue this conversation with you, Stephanie. How can families get a hold of you?
Well, I have a website that is in the process of being reworked. I have a Facebook page, Stephanie Sewell Education, which is much more current and up to date. I run a parent group, which is a subscription parent group. It'll be starting up again in the fall. And that's an excellent way for people to have facilitated guidance, also with the potential for one-on-one during that time. But a lot of the work that I do initially with families is one-on-one work. So reach out to me I offer a free Learn More call, which means I can tell you a bit about what I do. You can tell me about what you're looking for, and we can figure out if it's a good fit.
So you're going to give me those websites and connection points, and I will put that in the comments of this. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed this conversation. I'm sure it's been beneficial to many people. So thank you again.
Likewise. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Yeah, don't leave yet. I want to thank everybody for watching. Once again, Spark Homeschool Parents, these Facebook Lives are just a part of the conversation. Become part of the community on Facebook. Spark Educational, not Spark Educational Therapy, that's my company, but Spark Homeschool Parent. And I will see you again next Friday at 1 p.m. And remember that as homeschoolers, we can help our children find that spark that ignites their learning. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Diana.